Introducing Wibbly Wobbly Wonder Tent. Something Pat got from work. It was being binned because it's a little bit worn, and now we have a weather shelter. The weather lately has been very changeable, and I want to get this done, and I don't want to be in the rain. And this will be fine. It's just a marquee thing. Bit of a pain to put up on your own, but it gives me a decent shelter. It does mean the lighting might be affected a little bit because obviously it's going to block some of it, which is part of the reason I've not put the sides on. I can get on with stripping the rest of the front down now. I've done this side. This is the worst side. I thought it made sense to start there. So I now know the order of operations for getting this side off. I'm not stripping everything individually. I'm actually just trying to take the whole suspension corner off as one unit as much as possible, because that's going to help me with putting things away and time, so I can get this done a little bit quicker. After I've done that, I'll either move on to the wiring, which I've learned a few things about, or I'll do the rear axle. Again, I think that's going to be fairly simple to remove. It might make sense to remove the prop shaft first. We'll see when we get there. Bulkhead wise, I've got one little pivoty thing to take off and the handbrake cable, and really that's it. I would like to get the door strikers off, but they're proving difficult because the screws are seized in. You can still buy them, so it's not the end of the world if I can't salvage those. Yeah, there's not much to go. Oh, and I mustn't forget the bumper irons, just in case ours are actually bent, because I'm not sure. Order of operations then. First thing I'm going to remove is the brake cable guide plate, and that's for your brake cable that comes through here. If you can't get these undone, you can usually unscrew this and get the cable out the way to get to the fixings. This side access is much better. And there's just 4 bolts, and when you remove them, you have that. Then we will try and undo this one. I might need to take an angle grinder to it though. The threads, well, they're not really threads anymore. We'll see what goes on with that one. On this side, the mount had actually rotted off the chassis, so I didn't have anything to undo there. Those 2 items done, we then take off the lever arm shock absorber thingy. Just 2 through bolts here. The other side came undone really easily. Just a nylock this side. And you have another one there. Now, I'm not sure how this normally disconnects from the drop links. I suspect that normally the metal bar that goes through here is bonded to the rubber bush, and you just undo this nut here. But if it's anything like the other side, the bush will be so degraded that once this unit up here is unbolted, the arm will just pull out. It saves some time if that's the case. So that will then be the stuff that holds the upper part of the hub onto the chassis. We then move on to what holds the lower part of the hub onto the chassis. And you have a bolt here, which I think goes through what's essentially the kingpin assembly, because there's a couple of bushes back here and they go through this upright. So normal bolt head this side. Castellated nut with a split pin through it this side. I will try and undo this. The other side was so rusty and crusty I had to angle grind it, which wasn't ideal. That will then mean that basically your hub will then be attached by just 1 bolt up there, which we'll come to, and the lower arm should be loose. The spring, you don't need spring compressors for. To undo that through bolt there, it was very difficult to do the other side because the old grease just glued it in place, so that might fight us. But before you knock that one out fully, put a jack underneath this arm and let it take the weight of the spring, and once you've got that knocked out, you can then release the pressure on the jack, the spring will push down on the arm, and you should then be able to get the spring out. You can also do the spring before doing that bolt. I'll see how I feel when I do it, but you don't need spring compressors. These springs are quite soft and they're not really under a lot of tension, which is nice. So on the assumption all that goes smoothly, the last thing to remove is the bolt here, which is a through bolt, and that allows the arm to pivot. It might be a bit tricky to do this side because you've got another pivot there, which I think is gear linkage related, but we'll see. The other side came undone very easily. Give that a wiggle and then the whole assembly comes out in one piece. In fact, here's one I prepared earlier. This one did go a little bit easier because of course that had rotted off, and some of the bolts I had to do with an angle grinder, which they always come undone a lot faster with an angle grinder. But this is your whole sort of corner assembly for the suspension, and that's where a lot of the weight is in the front end because these are all cast parts. So this is what we're aiming for, and we'll see how we get on. I've run across my first problem. I tried unscrewing the cable, if that would help. It doesn't. I'd forgotten because I angle grinded the other side, because there wasn't much left of the bolt heads. On this side, you can just see under there that there are nuts on the back of those bolts, and I have to get those off. So I'll see what tool I can get into this gap, because it's not the easiest and you can't really see what you're doing. Figured it out. I'm trying to be good and wear gloves as well. It won't last. You can do it, but it's not the easiest, and the lower ratchet keeps trying to trap my fingers against the spring. What I wouldn't give some really good power tools for these kind of jobs. Never mind, we'll carry on off camera because this is boring to watch. Oh, that was easy. It came undone no problem. Unlike the other ones, which I had to angle grind off, unfortunately. Oh well, it happens. It does mean there's a little bit of scarring on the plate, but it's plenty thick enough to cope with that, I think. And that's how it comes undone. First stage down. Next stage, this thing, hopefully it doesn't put up the same sort of fight. Well, these came undone really easy, so just drift the bolts out. Might need a little bit of oh no, it's fine, no tap needed. And this bush is a little bit more resistant. There we go. That wasn't actually that difficult to remove, which is nice. I'm not sure why the bolts come undone so easily, but they did. I'm not going to complain. as suspected, there was no one doing that one. So angle grinder it was. And we just tap the bolt out, hopefully. Oh, good. There we are. It's a shame to cut through chunky stuff like that, but never mind. Now then, yeah, I'll have to undo the other bits and pieces so that I've got enough room here to clear this. Happy days, it came undone. The split pin put up more of a fight than the nut did. So I'm pleased about that. I only broke one drill bit trying to drill out the split pin. The other nice thing is I've already started to knock the bolt through. And it's not really putting up a fight. So that's a huge relief. I'm going to support this arm before I knock this through, just in case I need it for the spring. And we'll see how we go. Might need someone to put some weight on this. Looks like that's called kingpin thing. Let's try another jack. That might not work either. Do it this way. I'm going to need Pat to stand on this, I think. We had to do this last time. I figured out a solution, but it's kind of janky. The problem has happened that basically, as I've undone the nut and started to drive the bolt through, this is lifted, the arm has kind of dropped because of the spring, and there's not enough weight on the car to actually push everything into line. If you've got the engine and everything in, there's probably enough weight that this doesn't happen. But I found if I put my jack underneath the bolt head on this side and knock it through, it actually does work. So I don't need Pat to stand on things, which is good for Pat. It's just a bit of an odd way to do it. Safety advice? Don't. Because I don't think it is, but I mean, don't even do as I say on this one. I'm just using a very long punch. One of these jobbies. I'll let that down a bit. Well, it looks fairly loose. Might go the rest of the way on its own. Might not. Because now my punch is stuck. punch isn't stuck. Good. Now my punch is stuck. One bolt out. Good. One punch stuck. Bad. Okay, yeah, well done me. Still, got the bolt out. Well, that was exciting, and we missed it. I was hitting the bottom of the arm just to get the punch to wiggle out, and it popped out, and everything very slowly and gracefully sort of unfolded. Which is great. It's now apart. I also did realise that realistically, you could leave that bolt attached and just undo it the other side. It would probably come apart, but this is the way I know to do it, so this is how I'm doing it. I'll let that jack down and we'll get the spring out. It's actually jumped up off its axle stands as well when it did that. There we go. Remember kids, safety third. I might... yeah, I'm going to have to jack the actual chassis up a little bit to get that spring out. Go. That's out. Oops. This one might go a little bit easier than the other side, I'm hoping so. You have a bolt that runs through this cross member here and through the arm, and it's, well, I'm using 21mm. I don't know what it would be in Imperial, but I'm using the tools I have available, and oh yeah, it's undoing quite easily, which is good. Hopefully this bolt drives out easier than the other side. The other side was a bit of a pain. We shall see. And of course this is a lot easier with no bodywork, no engine, no radiator. I don't imagine this would be fun without. Almost there. And there we go, that's undone quite well. Now I'm hoping I can just drive this out, but we shall see. Oh, wow, yeah. The other side of this fought me so hard, I didn't expect it to come out quite that easily. What a relief. That's why you start with the difficult side first. Now just to get the arm off. We'll be right back. A small amount of wiggling and hammering later, and we have the lower arm off. And this has come unbonded, but could be stuck back on. The bushing looks okay. You'd probably replace this if you're redoing it all. Plan is, with parts like this, is to actually clean them up, paint them, label them, and have them available for future if something should happen or somebody else comes unstuck. Parts of these cars aren't exactly easy to find. We have now just one more bolt to go, which is this one here. It was very easy on the other side. Considering how easily most of this has come apart this side, I'm optimistic. And then we'll have all of the front suspension off and most of the weight off the car, what's left of it. If in doubt, fire. So we've finally got that to break free. I'm just going to finish knocking that all the way out. This little pin that's part of the chassis there was a bit of a pain because the bracket, which is one of these jobbies, was in the way. So we got that off, and yeah, let's drive this out. Bit hot to handle, but we've got it out. The old grease that was on here had turned to glue, and as soon as it cooled down a little bit too far, it just got stuck again. So I had to keep quite a bit of heat on and knock that out. But that's out now, which is good. I'm going to let the jack down and see how easily all of this corner now comes off. It's quite heavy. There we are. So yes, probably easier to handle this when it's all broken down into its component parts, but for what we're doing, with stripping it down and getting things in storage as quickly as we can, this makes the most amount of sense. And I can strip that down later. So that's all the heavy stuff off the front now. I can move on to the more lightweight things like the handbrake cable up there and the wiring harness, which I just want for some reference uses, and then we can move on to the back end. These two screws, or bolts, whichever you prefer to call them, that hold in the brake light switch, the heads are just rusted to blobs, so I've ground them off and I'm just going to knock them out. There we go. And that will allow me to get the brake light switch out, so that I can now repair or replace that, and that is different to the one on our car, so that should help. It might be the same as a Series 1 Land Rover, we shall see. We're getting there on the knickknacks. Battery cable is off. It is too far gone to reuse, unsurprisingly, but it's complete end to end, so it's great reference. Wiring harness is proving difficult. It's not wanting to come unthreaded, and I can do that last, so that's not a big deal. What I'm dealing with now is the main brake rod on this side. Actually, it's the only brake rod front to back on the car, thinking about it. It runs from the pedal here forwards to the front drums, which is where you have the cables going to the hubs, and then all the way back here and feeds both rear drums. When you press the pedal, all of these mechanical doodads do their thing and make the brakes work. Most of it is held together with clevis or clevis pins and split pins, and they are a nightmare to remove because they've been on here forever. But I'm getting there. Again, I don't know what the correct procedure is for removing all this, so I'm just trying to apply some common sense. For example, I want to disconnect this piece here so that I can remove the long rod to the front of the car, because this pivot section here feeds both rear drums and the bracket it goes through is welded to the axles. So there's no point me dismantling this because I can just remove that with the axle all in one assembly. But I do need to disconnect this to get it detached from the car. There is a guide here. The heads, I thought it was welded on, but no, they were just rust. So I've ground those smooth and knocked this bracket off. That will allow me to feed this rod out. And at the front, I've already got that pin out, so this is free from this main pivot area here. So hopefully this will feed back through, and when I remove that bracket, that hole will be big enough to take everything out to the back axle and off the car, so I can store them somewhere safe. I don't imagine they really break ever, but maybe they're hard to replace. It strikes me as something sensible to save. That's about 3 or 4 hours that I've spent on that so far, and yeah, not much to go. There's a host of handy bits and bobs there, and it is lunchtime now. Yeah, I get into these jobs and I forget to eat, so let's go and sort that out. I think we're going to move the chassis from this spot to do the rear axle because it's going to be a little bit easier for storage, and it will also mean we can get in the garage properly and get the other Lanchester out and actually start putting some of that back together, which would be nice, because at the moment this has taken priority and stopped us doing anything else on any of the cars really. It's all change. We did some measuring and some shuffling, and we found that we could move the chassis in front of the Princess quite comfortably, and now we can get the main Lanchester out and get that sorted. So from previous efforts, this is some of the suspension and pieces that came off the front on the bad corner, and then this is everything off the other side, and there's a good bit of weight there. I've got to find somewhere to put all of that. The chassis itself, I've not bothered putting it on the axle stands. There's not really any need, because what I need to work on with these brake rods and things can be done with it on the floor quite safely. Can't fall off and get me. Didn't do the rear axle today because, quite honestly, it's more work than I had in me for the sort of fighting with bolts and all that sort of business. I just didn't want to do it. It can happen another day. It's easy enough to do while it's sat here. It's not in the way of the Princess. The Princess isn't in its way. The wiring harness is all removed. It isn't labelled, but that's okay. And one nice thing I discovered is this brake light switch. It's very hard to use one-handed, but it isn't actually stuck. It does work, it just needs a clean, so we should be okay with that. That should be completely rebuildable and usable on our car. That should fix our brake light switch problem. Even the rubber gasket is in good shape, so I'm very happy about that. Salvaged a few clips and things as well, the usual. The big thing I ended up doing instead today was a spring clean in the garage, because, well, space is something of a premium here, and it's very difficult for me to get everything put away properly in a way that makes it useful to get to. So I've just tried to prioritise where things live. That gun cabinet is up for sale. It was a curb find. It wasn't useful for what I expected it to be, so I shall be shifting that on. But other than that, everything in here is useful, like the front wing for the Princess, which, yeah, that was an important find. And just boxes of spares. Unfortunately, these boxes have started to collapse and I can't afford the racking I want yet, so they're just going to have to hold on a little bit longer until I can. There's all kinds of just stuff that's not really worth anything to anybody but me, like the front end of a Princess and the back end of a Princess, and yeah, heater boxes and stuff. It's a bit of a motley assortment, and welding cardboard to protect glass. The good thing is, this one hasn't suffered while it's been trapped in the garage for the last month or so. There's no new bug activity, no vermin, nothing like that, so I'm quite happy about that. I was a little bit nervous, given what we'd found before, that it might have suffered a bit. Very loosely throwing the back seat back in. Nothing's really fastened down at the moment, it's just a case of getting things tidied away. Same with the floor and all of that. But I can now get on with finishing this repair on this wheel arch. I'm not using this Quickwood stuff again, I'm using something else. Knocked the trim rings on. They do need the oxalic acid treatment and some lacquer and that sort of business. For now, they're just knocked on, just to get them out the way. And I must say, even though the car's a bit patchworky at the moment, they do look nice on the car. It does look better with these trims than without, so I'm happy about that. Only issue, of course, is we've only got 3. So if you happen to have one of these beauty rings that's the right size and the right design for this car, I don't know, let me know in the comments. Get in touch, because we would quite like to have a 4th one. They don't have to be pristine or shiny. They can be a bit crusty. You know, this sort of condition is fine, as long as they've not got holes in them and they're not falling apart. They'll do. For what this car is, that's all we need. So Pat's going to help me with the last stage, which is just making sure everything goes back in the garage as it should do. Taking the gazebo down, because it's a pain to do on your own, and then just ferrying all of these bits and pieces that we've got left. The wings, and yeah, the donor car has been very, very useful. It really has. We'll be able to shift our attention to this one.